Yoko Ono's scam philosophy goes by grapefruit. I don't buy it. It was an attempt to manipulate a neuroplasm and extrude implanted trauma. It was a scam. And the bait of asking me what the Jewish soul is has overtones of a scam because it impardonably depicts me as speaking for something that many Orthodox Jewish people who practice the religion and preserve the culture for centuries are still searching for. All of us, in our prayers and ruminations across all cultures, are searching for understanding and faith and the courage that comes with faith. Um, I'm not being a hypocrite. I know I've said I understand the Jewish soul. And I think that there's inconsistency built into human nature from time to time. I experienced oppression at the hands of the Jews, but it was sentimental oppression. It was more like the way that Hamas treats their hostages than Israel does. And I learned certain things from that. An artist in Britain who worked me over promoting the storyline of Lenin's stuff for the Israelis and the fundamentalist tripartite system of the oligarchs. Um, Favored a poet named Anne Sexton who wrote To Bedlam and Halfway Back. The artistry of Peter Gabriel bears no resemblance, of course, to religion. He's simply a hooligan with a knife at the jugular vein. But there is some crossover in the situation of religious um, sincerity in the idea that the Jews who, to be fair, tortured me, and it's the only fair word I can think of, was to meet me halfway from their historic experience. And this meeting of people at halfway contains a serious diplomatic gesture. One of my Jewish girlfriends used to pause. She was very sentimental towards me. There was a lot of love and passion between us. It didn't work out. But she used to say, let's not get hot and heavy. I think that um, the idea that there's a shadow of history that makes ruminations on the Jewish experience morbid is something you do need to be careful of because it becomes um, destructive. And guerrillas from Israel have caused a lot of people pain. They're very extremely driven into paranoid strategies. I know this because I grew up among them and heard them talk and saw them. They made me shudder on innumerable occasions. But um, America has been blessed with Hollywood, where you can't tell a friend from a foe, where people just change masks and get paid for drilling into people's heads the idea that they're sincere for 2 hours. And one of the things that we have in the metallurgy world is scarcity and inequitable distribution, and various causes of human sacrifice that we could all um, profit from trying to stop. Misappropriated resources, gluttony, concentration of wealth, an absurd disdain for the suffering of others. And it's meaningless to say that that's a Jewish characteristic, because it certainly is not. However, groups do tend to be out for themselves. Whenever the NAACP can make Native American its cause, it does. And it's foolishness to say that that's a historic legacy. The Buffalo Soldiers were so called that, but I don't want to get into it. The special pleading goes through all of the ranks, and it's a roulette wheel of grievances. Everybody knows that. In America, we do try to leave private citizens alone to contribute as best they can, because there's an idea of public education to empower us. And of course, that's one of the reasons why Robert Kennedy is so fanatically popular and probably going to win the election, is because he understands that. His campaign may not be perfect, but it is a very real educational gesture. What has fallen by the wayside in public education under the terminal instigation of neocons, which do operate in a sort of special relationship with the Israelis at present, is that the basic truth the children should have explained to them, not to go sleeping with the first person that comes along just because your explosive is hot and adrenal, because it will be used to compromise your prospects. I don't think anybody doubts that James McRollin Creary had potential that was destroyed by entrapment, pimpery of the sort that a Pentagon official was evidently arrested for. And certainly Mackenzie Shirilla was executed socially to advertise. And that, of course, has nothing to do with Jews. There are stories, and certainly Jews did participate in it, but corruption is a human dilemma. The stories of old about the Pharaoh and the crucifixion of Jesus, those are perennial instigators of conflict. And what the Society of Separation of Church and State has tried to do, it's futile for Joe Biden to overlook that the Jews look with great disdain on the separation of church and state, because it means that religion and people are separated, when Jews are both religion and people. And then to talk about a democracy based on the philosophy that's insurgently different than our own, trying to organize various forms of justification for scrapping separation of church and state. The justification for separation of church and state is a good one. It's to grant all people the dignities that they're entitled to before the law, no matter what they believe or what religion they practice. That's the bottom line. and it's a very healthy coalition. People who enjoy religious discussions and meetings should be careful not to have ego aggrandizement on the mantelpiece. It's okay to have your own private preferences when it comes to people, of course, but it's ludicrous to believe that your dramatic affections outmeasure the value of another person's. The only measurement that's valid is the way that we treat one another. Now, when it comes to cruelty based on personal preference for one group of people over another, it's clear that Jewish experience was often as a victim of that. It does them no credit to be a perpetrator. And that's what I mean when I say that I understand that what they're doing is humiliating those of us who believe we have a duty to take a stand for the weak and helpless, particularly children. And it's making us guilty of their ancestral grudge in their eyes, which is why I always said we had to be careful. We should have been more careful. It's also what I mean when I say I understand the Jewish soul, because the Jewish soul is certainly not trying to be gratuitously vicious towards other people. I've seen people who were Jewish protest and cry and want to understand how it's possible that in their name, innocent people are suffering unspeakable, depraved, mean violations of their dignity, health, life, and being killed in a very unrighteous misfortune. So to challenge me on the issue of the soul of Jewry is to allege that unrighteousness is built into the Jewish character. That I do not believe. Something more painful and furthest has taken place in the combat between the decision to do right and to do wrong that goes on in the side of every single person. When we are sociable about the conditions that we build, it's easier for us to ameliorate suffering from the past and to mitigate fear of future oppression. And that is why I believe very strongly that Israel's blitzkrieg on Gaza should end for their own sake as well as everyone else's. I say that as a man. I'm not a Jew.